Test, test. Test.
Test, test.
Check 1, 2.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So if I can ask everybody to please take their seats. We have quorum in the room. So welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of November the 4th, 2015. I'm just going to run through the agenda to start. So we've received no regrets, as well no declarations of interest. Can we confirm the minutes of the 7th of October 2015? Okay. Communications as set out and noted in the agenda. First item on the agenda is the Ministry of Transportation presentation preliminary design and environmental assessment for the rehabilitation or replacement of structure and culverts along Highway 417 between the Aviation Parkway and Ramseyville Road.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I had a question on the inquiry response on the interlock.
Okay, just one question.
A series of questions.
Okay, well then we're going to hold it then if you don't mind. Okay.
Well, do we have to? I think we have to vote to pull
yes,
the police.
Well, we'll come back to that after we go through the agenda. So we're gonna hold item number 1 then, as we have a presentation from MTO. Item number 2 is the status update. Transportation Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending the 23rd of October 2015. Can we receive this? Okay, thank you. Number 3 is the roadside memorials policy, and we have a couple of delegations to speak to that matter, so we'll hold that. Number 4 is improving the urban design in front of the Embassy of the United States of America. And we do not have a presentation on this, and I don't believe we have any delegations.
I just have a comment to make.
Okay, so we'll hold it for Councillor Fleury's comment. Number 5 is an item brought forward by Councillor Deans regarding Hunt Club Road speed reduction, and we have a couple of delegations on that, so we'll hold that as well. And we'll go back to the beginning then. So the first thing, can we vote to lift the inquiry so Councillor Fleury can ask his questions? Carried. Okay, Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question is to Kevin. Kevin, reading the inquiry, it's very clear. I'm just confused about a couple of elements. One being, is there a policy direction that gives the authority to? I see the I'll preface with a comment. So, I see the interlock as a strategic investment that council did or is doing when it renews the street. Obviously, now we use more pavers, which are bigger than the old interlock, and I can understand in terms of accessibility, in terms of being responsive and correcting the urgent repairs. That asphalt is the easiest, most affordable way to go. But when we see areas where streets aren't being redone, but they do have existing interlock and it's becoming problematic, where was the direction to go over and just asphalt? Because I do see that it's like asphalting an investment. We're losing that interlock use. So I'd like to hear you on that front.
Chair, the asphalt repair is meant to be a temporary repair, and we do it in quick fashions to make sure that the trip hazard is taken care of. The idea is to go after that and take the asphalt off and replace it with a new paver. So the new paver would be the permanent repair.
And what is the intent out of a permanent? Because if you go around downtown, you'll know, across the city, you'll notice that there's good work that's being done in some of the current concrete pads where the edges are lifted and we patch that and it's properly done to meet the accessibility standards. But like, what is the threshold if it's more than one pad, more than 3 pads that will actually do a concrete replacement? And that applies as well, in my mind, to the interlock discussion.
Chair, if the area is in such disrepair, and I don't have the metrics with me, but sizable enough that it would be something we would refer to our partners in ISD to look at a life cycle renewal. So it would go into the life cycle stream, and ISD would look at it for a complete replacement.
In areas that are newer investments, I'll use Rideau Street, for example. There's not an issue here, but if there is an accessibility or trip hazard on Rideau Street, it's recently redone, what would be the standard? Would we go in and asphalt?
Chair, again, we would asphalt on a temporary basis. We do keep a stock of a large number and variety of pavers in our yard. So, again, the idea would be to get back out after the asphalt's done, remove the asphalt, and replace it with a paver specific to the area.
So that non-temporary fix fits in what context? Because we're seeing more and more patches, and obviously our infrastructure is getting older. So I can appreciate that you're maintaining the accessibility standards and you're correcting the trip hazards. But how is it pieced all together holistically?
Chair, if I understand the councillor's question correctly, maybe I can answer it this way. Since the OADA legislation's come in, and that did change our maintenance standard from a 3-centimeter trip hazard down to a 2-centimeter trip hazard. And the councillor is right, there are more and more asphalt patches showing up around the city. It has increased our maintenance requirement. So those asphalt patches, again, they're meant to be temporary patches, but because there's been so many of them, given the tolerance standard coming down, that it's taking us longer to get to those to do the final repair.
Thank you. I just wrap this up by a final comment. I can understand the ongoing pressures of fixing, and we should continue to do that. But I do see a challenge where, for example, the interlock zones, where it's such a nice asset to see the interlocked, and just paving over interlock is really not a solution for this. So I'll leave it at that. I don't know where I'm going to take this discussion, but I appreciate the responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Forey. Our next item is the Ministry of Transportation is going to be giving us a presentation, as I said, on the replacement and rehabilitation of structures and culverts along Highway 417. So if I could ask the MTO team to come forward. And maybe they could start by introducing themselves and explaining what their particular role is with regard to this project. Good morning, and thank you for coming down.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for making time for us on your agenda. My name is David Lindensmith, the Senior Project Engineer for MTO on this environmental assessment. To my left is Steve Pilgrim from our consultants, McIntosh Perry, who will be making a presentation on this project. And to my right is Dave Steed, McIntosh Perry's traffic specialist for this project. So the essence of the project is, as you said, to develop a strategy for rehabilitation or replacement of a series of bridges and large structural culverts between the Aviation Parkway and Ramseyville Road, and to get EA approval for that. So with that, I'd like to give it to Steve Pilgrim from McIntosh Perry to make the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dave, for the introduction. So as we do have a presentation here that I'll tab through, so by all means, just take a look and ask questions if you have any as they come up. The first slide, just as an outline of the presentation today, in essence, just wanting to give everybody just a quick idea, just a broader interpretation of what the study area looks like, the purpose of our study, what some of the existing conditions of the bridges and culverts are, ultimately what the study recommendations are, and just to highlight some of the key public consultation that we have undertaken at this time. The study map that you see here, as David mentioned, starts up at the Ottawa Road 174 Aviation Parkway area, and then heads, I guess we call it east, down to Ramseyville Road. You can see on the map that all the blue squares represent the bridges or on the project, and all the green circles represent the structural culverts that we looked at. There will be some just kind of key maps or sub-maps as we flip through the slides, but if we need to, we can come back to this. So the key study purpose of the project was ultimately to develop a plan of replacement or rehabilitation for the bridges and culverts, and ultimately then to obtain environmental clearance for the recommended alternatives. The project is being undertaken in accordance with the Ministry of Transportation Class Environmental Assessment. The project was identified as a Group B project, and that's the process that we've followed through the preliminary design. It should be noted as well, just there was a previous study completed by the Ministry of Transportation for the 6-laning of Highway 417 from Ottawa Road 174 to Hunt Club. That study was taken into account or consideration when reviewing the recommended alternatives. So the next slide here is just the summary of the existing conditions of the bridges. All the bridges were constructed in the late 1960s or the mid-1970s. Through various structural inspections, they are deemed to be in fair to good condition, with the recommended or the required upgrades including items such as bearing replacements, barrier wall replacements, expansion joint replacement, deck patching, and that's for thick slab bridges only, semi-integral conversion and deck replacement for thin slab bridges, substructure repairs, seismic retrofits, and then ultimately waterproofing and paving upon completion of the rehabilitation or paving. So to kind of just to break it up a bit, we've kind of tagged some of the similarities in some of the sites. So the first one here is the freeway underpasses that were included in the project. This included Searville, Innes, and Walkley. Through the study, it was identified that these would be rehabilitated. The rehabilitation options for the construction staging identified that access across the bridges for pedestrians and cyclists would be maintained, and that the existing municipal cross-section would also be maintained upon completion of construction. At Searville Road in particular, it was going to be completed as a 2-stage construction, with construction happening on the north and then the south. This permitted a single lane of traffic to be maintained across the bridge at any given time. The traffic would then be controlled with traffic signals at that site. At Innes and Walkley, a bit larger structures, so there's a multi-stage construction approach being taken there. There will be some lane reductions with a minimum of 1 lane per direction being maintained at any given time. The result of the proposed rehabilitation strategies did identify that there would be some ramp closures at Innes and Walkley. At Innes, it was the Highway 417 eastbound on-ramp would be closed for 1 stage, and then similarly the Highway 417 eastbound on-ramp would also be closed for 1 stage at Walkley. This slide here just highlights the detour routes that are being proposed for the ramp closures. The top is the Innes, the bottom ones is the Walkley closure. So the top slide looking at Innes is what we call is the bypass detour. So if somebody shows up at the ramp closure, then they would then be signed to then continue to Bantry, Old Innes Road, Sheffield Road, and then down Walkley back to 417 eastbound. However, to avoid any additional traffic through the site if possible, there is an intercept detour, that's the red one. So the intercept detour would have signed traffic up Blair Road to Ottawa Road 174 and then back to 417 eastbound. At Walkley, due to the kind of the origin point of some of the traffic, an intercept detour wasn't reasonable at this site, so a pass-by detour is being proposed, and this is included based on going through, pushing traffic through the site, and then going Walkley Road, Hawthorne, Hunt Club, and then back to 417 eastbound. So that was the underpasses for the project. The freeway overpasses are kind of broken up into some subsections here that I'll flip through now. The first underpass that were looked at here was bridge ID number 3, which you can see in the subset map on the side. We refer to that as aviation wide deck. That is the bridge that carries 417 westbound traffic, but also has the east leg which splits and heads up North Aviation Parkway. So the east leg bridge currently has the 1 lane of traffic on it. It can be staged with the maintaining 1 lane of traffic. However, the west leg will require a multi-stage construction. 2 lanes of traffic on 417 would be maintained for the most of the duration of the construction. However, there will be times where off-peak closures will be required to take it down to 1 lane in order to facilitate all the proposed rehabilitation. The other sites that were deemed kind of grouped together are bridge IDs 1, 2, and 8, which you can also see in the subset map, which is Aviation Parkway southbound, Aviation Parkway northbound, and Highway 417 Green Creek off-ramp, which you can see in the subset map. So the southbound bridge is obviously number 1 and 2 and 8. All these bridges currently carry 1 lane of traffic across them, with the exception of the southbound bridge. 2 lanes of traffic are currently moving across that bridge. Based on the proposed rehabilitation, the southbound bridge traffic would have to be merged to 1 lane prior to crossing the bridge. And there's an image there. The proposed rehabilitation has that converging to 1 lane with control of traffic signals just at the interface of the ramp and the southbound movement. The next group of sites that were tagged together were some other freeway overpasses, all on 417. The Greens Creek eastbound and westbound bridges, which are just located south of Innis. There's the CPR overhead eastbound and westbound bridges just a little bit further south. And then south of Walkley is the 2 CNR overhead eastbound and westbound bridges. These bridges currently maintain 2 lanes of traffic across them now. 2 lanes of traffic are proposed to be maintained during the rehabilitation as well. A multi-stage construction will be used at these sites. No ramp closures are proposed with the recommended alternatives, and railway traffic would be maintained at the CNR and CPR sites for these bridges. The last bridge was the freeway overpass at Ramseyville Road, eastbound and westbound. At this site here, replacement was identified as the preferred alternative at this site, with 2 new bridges being built in the median and a new median alignment proposed as well. So traffic would ultimately be maintained on the existing alignment of bridges until the new facility was constructed. Traffic would then be diverted to the new one, and subsequently the old bridge and old alignment would be abandoned or removed. So that wraps up the bridges, and moving forward to the culverts. So there was 14 structural culverts. Again, very similar timelines. They were constructed in the late 1960s and mid-1970s. They're all identified as overall in good condition. A summary of the different types of culverts out there consisted of one single-cell corrugated steel pipe culvert. It had medium corrosion at the invert. 3 multi-cell corrugated steel pipe culverts, again, similar condition of medium corrosion at the invert. And then there was also 10 concrete structural culverts that had isolated areas of deteriorated concrete. For these culverts, rehab, replacement, removal, and do nothing were considered reasonable alternatives for consideration. Again, these were kind of grouped together based on the types of culverts that they were. So the first grouping that we have here is Culvert 1 and Culvert 14. Culvert 1 is located just in the median of Ottawa Road 174 between the eastbound and westbound lanes. And Culvert 14 is located just under Ramseyville Road, or adjacent to Ramseyville Road under the 417. So culvert 1, is, since it's not carrying any traffic right now, is deemed to be redundant and non-essential. Therefore, it's proposed that that site be removed. And also at culvert 14, the proposed bridge replacement alternative at that site makes the culvert redundant and no longer needed, so therefore being proposed for removal as well. The next group of culverts are a list of the concrete culverts that were included in part of the project. The number of the ID is a bit out of order, but the 4, 5, 8, 9, 2, 3, 6, and 7 scattered throughout. You can see them on the subset map of their various locations. Essentially at these sites here is proposed that isolated concrete repairs be completed. Due to the nature of the work, minor traffic impacts are anticipated just because of the nature of the traffic. Construction access would be via shoulder closures, with the work being done off of the traveled lane, and no roadway excavation is required that would require us to impact traffic. With exception culvert 6, which is located just north of the Innis ramp terminals, there would be some short duration ramp closures of the Highway 417 eastbound to Innis east and westbound off ramp, and similarly the Innis east westbound to Highway 417 westbound on ramp. This is simply just required for short duration in order for the contractor to set up and take down their construction site, but then would be reopened while construction was being carried out. This slide, I'll just start with the top, the blue one. So this is the multi-cell corrugated steel pipes. So there's 3 of these locations, kind of around the Walkley interchange, culvert 10, 11, and 12. Again, these culverts had medium corrosion of the invert, so rehabilitation was recommended. A proposal of invert paving is the preferred alternative, and again, similar as the others, there's minor traffic impacts as the work would be outside the travel lanes. There just would be some construction access from the roadway. And at the bottom is a concrete culvert with a recommendation of do nothing. The culvert at this site is under the new Hunt Club interchange bridge there. The MTO currently undertook a rehabilitation of this culvert in this past year, so therefore the structural needs have been addressed, and a do nothing was recommended at this time. On this slide here is just a summary of the public consultation that was undertaken through the duration of the project. We've met with different groups from the City of Ottawa staff, OC Transpo. We've completed 3 municipal advisory committee meetings, one in September 2014, February 2015, and then just recently held one in October. PIC number 1 was held in March of 2015, and we're planning our next PIC to present the technically preferred alternatives to the public on November 25th. So just wrapping up, I guess just thanking everybody here for fitting us on the agenda. We appreciate the opportunity to come and just provide an overview of our study. And I guess just turn it back to you guys if you had any questions.
Thank you very much for coming down and making the presentation. Are there any questions for the delegation? Councilor Manette.
Thank you. Will this work be done off-peak, especially around Innis Road?
Sorry, what's
will the work be done off-peak, especially around Innis Road? Because right now we're putting all the east end traffic towards Innis Road, especially with the work that's being undertaken.
If I may, Councillor, this is preliminary design and environmental assessment, so we have at least a year of detailed design.
So it will not affect the
before us, before we can go to tender, and mindful of the construction activities that are happening in the East End now. In all likelihood, this would be undertaken as 2 contracts starting toward Ramseyville and working its way toward the city.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Flory.
I'll go back to the last MTO presentation we had. The materials that are now used over the overpass, so you have the barrier and then you have this glass structure. You know what I'm talking about? Does it make sense? The glass or plexiglass, whatever you want to call it. Are you proposing to use some of those materials again in some of these rehabs?
I think that's something more we would look at in detail design. The purpose of this study was to gain environmental assessment and look at the more environmental issues, but that's something we'll look at in detail design.
Yeah, I realize where you're at in the stage. I guess I would just flag it as, you know, part of the issue is that those materials over time will look awful at the same time. So it'd be nice to vary the materials that are used so that you don't visually see that these bridges were rehabbed all at the same time, and then it just looks like an area is older in look over, you know, a 50-year period. And then my other question would be in terms of there might not be cycling facilities attached to all of this. There might be some along the way, but do you plan to leave enough room to bring in cycling tracks on those overpasses?
On the underpasses, we're constrained to the existing cross-section, where we have existing pathways beneath overpasses. We're maintaining those, and in the case of the Ramseyville Road Bridge, the NCC has indicated a preference for that path to be relocated to the opposite side of Ramseyville Road, so that's something we're looking to incorporate as well.
Merci.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you very much for coming down this morning. Before we move on to the next item, I was remiss at the beginning of the meeting. I should have welcomed all the students. It's bring your student or your child to work day, and I see in the audience we have a number of them. So welcome to Transportation Committee, and make sure that Mom or Dad take you out for lunch. So we're going to move on to the next item, and the next item is that of the roadside memorial policy review. And I just thought I would say a few words before we moved on to this and we heard the public delegations. So quite obviously this report has raised a number of issues, and we have seen coverage in the media and had feedback from residents and citizens on a whole host of issues, everything from the grieving process to safety issues, both in terms of the accident that occurred and also the placement of the memorials and the accessibility and distraction issues potentially around those. We've had discussions about the difference between an intersection or an area where a tragic thing has happened and an intersection that's actually a dangerous intersection. Sometimes the same, not always. And how the city responds to that. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more this morning as well. There are lots of moving parts to this particular issue. It's not a simple policy issue. It touches people's lives. And I want to thank staff for doing their best on this review and making their recommendations. We gave you pretty specific direction, and you went out and you followed that direction. I also very much want to thank members of the public, because both as chair and as committee members, we received a lot of feedback, whether it be phone calls, emails, letters from residents of the city. We have some today that are here to make delegation to the committee. So I want to thank you very much for your input on this report and the process that we're looking at today. This feedback allowed both myself and Councillor Chernyshenko, who initiated this process some time ago, asking staff to do a review of this by way of a councillor's report. It allowed Councillor Chernyshenko and I to sit down last week and have a thoughtful discussion about the input and the feedback that we'd received to date. And it was instrumental in helping us, I hope, come to a compromise, a reasonable compromise solution to this, which is that Councillor Chernushenko is going to be moving a motion this morning, which I'll ask him to introduce when I'm done, which will extend the time that these roadside memorials will be up from the proposed 3 months to 6 months. At this point in time, of course, the existing bylaws don't allow for them to be there at all, but they are there. So this would be a 6-month increase over the current state of affairs. I believe, and I want to thank Councillor Chernushenko for this, that his motion is a reasonable compromise, that it's one of balance, that looked at what we were hearing from all sectors of our city. We had everything from people who think that the memorials should not be there at all, to people who think that the memorials should be there on an ongoing basis, and everything in between. So, again, I want to thank Councillor Chernushenko for the work that he did on this and in coming up with this proposal. And I also want to thank my colleagues on committee who both myself and Councillor Chernushenko have reached out to over the last number of days to have this discussion, and the support that they've shown to us in terms of this proposal for 6 months. So I want to thank them all for their support in dealing with a very complex and a very delicate issue. I'm now going to turn over the mic to Councillor Chernushenko to introduce his motion on this particular matter, and then we'll move to the public delegations. And staff, as always, while there's not a presentation, are available to take any questions that committee may have for them. Councillor Chernushenko.
Thank you very much, Chair Eglai. I will have a few questions, and I will want to make some remarks following the public presentations and when we get into debate, but at the moment I will purely introduce this motion. Whereas the proposed roadside memorials policy outlines the conditions under which roadside memorials will be permitted on the public right-of-way, and whereas a cornerstone of this policy is the length of time which a roadside memorial can remain in the right-of-way, and whereas best practices from municipalities across North America indicate time frames ranging from 3 months to 1 year, and whereas there are additional requirements for the memorial to remain in good repair and occupy no more than 1 square meter in space, and whereas members of the community have identified concerns with some existing memorials that have multiple components that are not secured, and this can cause issues for pedestrians, therefore be it resolved that Transportation Committee recommend Council adopt the amended roadside memorials policy as attached, which implements the following changes. Memorials allowed for a period of 6 months. Memorials are to be arranged as to occupy as little of the sidewalk as possible, and that all elements of the memorial be adequately secured to each other and to a fixed object such as a pole or a barrier. We then have attached to this the full draft policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chernushenko. So we have 2 public delegations signed up this morning. The first is Tina Belanger, and the second is Tim Farr. So if I could ask Ms. Belanger to come forward. I know that you submitted a written comment as well, and I believe in that comment you referenced the 3-month issue, and so I've given you a bit more information this morning about the proposed increase to 6 months. You have 5 minutes, and I turn the mic over to you.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. And I did hear on the CBC radio this morning the extension to 6 months. I'm here with a feeling of mixture of sadness and frustration. I'm sad because Meg Dussault was a wife, daughter, sister, aunt, and a close friend of mine for 45 years. Krista Johnson was also a daughter, sister, and well known to me and my family. She was also a colleague, a past employee of mine, and I am a friend of her mother's in Pembroke. Ghost bikes appear. It was not Meg's or Krista's families who put them up. It's a worldwide practice that is obviously continued by caring and dedicated advocates. My frustration lies with the city reporting that the presence of Meg's ghost bike on the corner of Bank and Riverside is a hazard. You say it's a narrow sidewalk impeding pedestrian traffic. I have been there. I have stood beside the bike while both cyclists and pedestrians have easily passed by. If something is a hazard, I agree it should not be there. But to say that it can be a hazard for 6 months, help me understand. How many accidents have there been since Meg's bike was erected there on the corner? Were they caused by the distraction of the ghost bike? Has there been a marked increase in accidents since August 2013? Was it not a hazard for the city to permit such a large volume of heavy vehicles to use that intersection during the Lansdowne construction? When I visit Meg's bike, I am always struck by the number of pedestrians and cyclists who stop and comment on what a wonderful tribute it is, how well it is kept up, and how emotional it is when they pass by. Often they are moved to tears themselves. But most importantly, the cyclists comment on how the presence of that ghost bike reminds them to be watchful while they are cycling or walking by. Even staff at the garage across the street were watering the flowers if there was a dry spell in the city. I understand that the city has received a number of calls objecting to Meg's bike. My question is, why do the city cater to those complaints? Do those calls make up a large percentage of the population in the area? Have you taken the time to conduct a broader survey throughout the city, especially in the neighborhoods adjacent to these memorials? Large trucks are still turning on that intersection. Why has nothing been done to remove that hazard? I've had to step back as a pedestrian on that corner when a large truck has turned. The traffic pole on that sidewalk is a larger impediment to accessibility than certainly that bike is. Has the committee or the staff who wrote today's report spoken with the family members of the cyclists who have died? Have you stood at the site and questioned passerbys yourselves? How can you vote without discussing options with the families? Are you afraid that they will speak from the heart and not be able to understand concerns, especially if legitimate, and therefore be unable to come up with a solution? Certainly in the case of the Dussault and the Johnson families, these people are sensible and intelligent and deserve a broader discussion. Meg's ghost bike has provided her husband, mother, siblings, and friends a place to find peace. I can't explain why we have such a feeling of closeness with Meg when we're there. It seems odd that we feel such strong emotions at a place where she was so tragically taken from us. Perhaps the city could gain understanding from consulting with mental health and grief counselors. Have you consulted with them? Passing Krista's bike brings a smile to my face. For the first little while, it made me sad. However, it now reminds me of the passionate and energetic young woman that she was, especially when it came to fitness, youth, and the betterment of young women. Her accident resulted in some well-needed changes to that area, and I also think of that legacy as I pass her ghost bike. I can only speak for the two people I know, but this will surely bring sadness to many families and friends of memorials all over this city, not just cyclists who have been taken, but families, young people with their lives ahead of them, and children, all who have died tragically. I hope you will stop and consider this decision affects many more than just the bank on the corner of Bank and Riverside. Meg was struck down in a busy intersection that is seen by hundreds of people every day and has been in the media because of its high profile. We understand that. Krista's death occurred in a spot that is slightly off the road but not noticed by as many people and therefore rarely mentioned. What about the memorial on Highway 174 Orleans and Airport Parkway honoring children? Will removing these really make a difference to anyone but the families left behind? I can't help feeling that this committee is afraid to take the time to understand the true phenomenon and unexplained emotional response from roadside memorials. Is the humanity of them not just as important as best practices? And, I guess, at what is acceptable time to grieve? There is nothing in your staff report addresses this. I work in children's mental health, and best practices are not taken from a few results out of a small group of 20. And they also have...
Ms. Belanger, you were now at 6 minutes. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay. All right. Well, finally, and most importantly, to the health and safety of the citizens that this committee is responsible for, I do believe that these memorials also teach the general public awareness, whether it be a conscious effort to keep your eyes on the road, not to drink and drive, and to be mindful of traffic, pedestrian, cyclists, or vehicular. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming down. Are there any questions for the delegation? Councillor Moffat.
I just have one. I noticed you look at it from the perspective, the sole perspective of the victim or the victim's family, or the grieving process. I just wanted to get your opinion on the other side of it. So, for instance, just recently, a drunk driver runs through a stop sign, crashed into someone's laneway, hits a tree and some trucks in their front yard, bursts into flames. The person dies. If a memorial appears there, so those people are awoken in their home at 3 in the morning, and someone dies in their front yard. If a memorial is placed there for an undetermined amount of time, that person has to relive that moment every time they leave their house. They probably do anyways. But the point is, there's a visual reminder of that incident in front of their home, something that's not their doing. And they have to live with that every day because they see this memorial. What's your take on that? Like, is that something they should live with?
No, I think that family has... It's their right, that family, to say that they don't want that there.
But if it's on the city's road allowance, they don't have that right. If we create a policy that allows it for an undetermined amount of time, or we don't have any policy whatsoever with no enforcement, it isn't that homeowner's right not to have that memorial.
So you're saying the city would like to put up something in every incident where someone is killed?
The city's not putting these up.
No, I know.
It's the family. So my point is...
So if the family is putting something, if somebody puts up something in front of that person's house and they don't want it there, I think it's the family's right to be able to say, no, I don't want it.
That's fair, but they actually don't have that right.
Yeah.
I mean, my point is there's no policy that gives them that right to take that down. So this policy aims to create that.
I think it...
It's not just about ghost bikes. It's not just about...
No, I realize
there's a lot of
other
factors to this. And I just wanted to make you aware that there is that other side, and that there are people that don't have that ability. A massive memorial in front of a business, a rural business, that customers come in and they're asking the business, well, what's that? Oh, someone crashed into our site and died. That's a great way to sell a product at your business. I mean,
Councillor, is there a question for the delegation?
No, I already asked the question. And we went back and forth.
Thank you.
But
I did say...
Are there any other questions for the delegation?
Public awareness that some of these sites, it's a hazardous site.
Seeing none, thank you very much for coming down this morning. And Mr. Tim Farr, I believe, is in the audience. Thank you, Mr. Farr, and you have 5 minutes.
Yep. I'm not here representing a delegation. I'm simply coming as a resident of Old Ottawa South. I'm a pedestrian, I'm a cyclist, I'm a driver. I would first of all like to say I thought Ms. Belanger's presentation was very moving and very heartfelt. It's difficult to listen to that. But I'm actually here to speak in support of what the staff have done. And I want to say I don't envy you in your position, because this is an incredibly difficult issue. It's almost impossible to square the circle. In my experience, if you attempt to voice an objection to a ghost bike, it's perceived as being disrespectful, minimizing the tragedy that took place, denigrating a sincere attempt to provide some sort of tribute to the victim. So it's very difficult, and as a result, in my neighborhood of Old Ottawa South, a lot of people feel intimidated to speak out, and it's too bad. And it's sort of ironic that a memorial which is intended to focus attention on the legacy of the victim, in fact, it becomes a source of controversy and division within a neighborhood. From my perspective, there's three things that you need to take into consideration when you're considering this. First of all, this is public property. It's paid for by taxpayers. And as somebody pointed out earlier, this is completely unregulated. No one was consulted whether they felt that their money should be spent on this in terms of maintenance, the use of that public space. I don't think that's appropriate. Second point I'd like to make is that I consider this a public safety hazard, and I'm going to speak specifically to the same memorial that Ms. Belanger referred to, the one at Bank and Riverside. Back St. Paddy's Day in the spring of this year, that particular memorial had, in addition to the white ghost bike, there were 2 flags. There was a planter with cedar bush. There was another planter with plastic flowers. There was green bunting decorating the railing of the Bank Street Bridge. And there was a leprechaun hat on the bridge abutment. That was a distraction. You simply had to be on the sidewalk and look at the reaction of drivers going by. We're attempting to solve the problem of distracted driving. We shouldn't be encouraging it by allowing that. And I'll note that it's been considerably reduced, the presence of that memorial, but I considered that a public safety hazard, and I brought it to the attention of my counselor at the time. And then finally, it's an obstruction. I said earlier I'm a cyclist. I make good use of the Rideau River pathway, and I can tell you that in the summer, when there are people out on the pathway, as well as people trying to move across the Bank Street Bridge to get over to the shopping center, that's a congested area. It's unsafe. In Old Ottawa South, one of the things which makes that neighborhood unique is the number of caregivers, and you'll often see women pushing those strollers with 3 or 4 seats. Watch them trying to maneuver around that when there are cyclists backed up trying to cross over Bank Street to continue down. So for essentially those 3 reasons, I'm very supportive of the city taking action. I'm very, very sympathetic to what the victim's family and friends must be going through. I have absolutely no objection if they want to erect, for example, like a brass plaque, something that I think the policy would allow, but within standards that the city sets, put in a discreet way, and as far as I'm concerned, it could be left there permanently. And if the city, I don't have any problem with the attempt to achieve a compromise on this. If you want to extend it from 3 to 6 months, I think that's a good attempt here to reach some sort of balance. But I guess I'd say that no matter what you do, you will not satisfy everyone around this debate. I'm sure you have received a lot of heat about this. You probably will continue to receive it. But speaking as a resident of Old Ottawa South, I think you're doing the right thing. And I, for one, hope that this passes.
That's it. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions for this delegation? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much. I'm going to ask, we now have Councillor Chernyshenko has just read the motion in effect. I'm going to, as the motion mover, I'm going to give you an opportunity to provide some context, if you wish, as we get into the debate. But before we go there, I don't know if people have any questions directly for staff. Councillor Caudry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just coming back to staff, in terms of, I think the delegation mentioned about accessibility issues related to these memorials on sidewalks in other areas of the city. If this motion passes as being presented this morning, will that issue be addressed in terms of the accessibility going forward for those 6-month trial period or whatever the trial period ends up being?
Mr. Chair, there's a number of aspects within the policy that deal with under the criteria under which the city would accept the memorial staying in place. One of those is to maintain a 1.8 meter pathway, which meets our accessibility guidelines. So it's the opinion of staff that if the policy is approved, that we would still be able to maintain our accessibility requirements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moody. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chernyshenko.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions then. I just want to make sure it's very clear to all of us, as I understand it. Currently, there is a bylaw which governs roadside or sidewalk installations of any kind, if I understand correctly. But the city has chosen, if you will, to let it go in the case of ghost bikes and other spontaneous memorials to this point. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I apologize. Would you mind repeating the question?
Currently, it's not as if there is nothing currently governing our sidewalks and installations on the sidewalks. Let's think specifically of a couple of the recent ghost bikes. What the city has done, our staff has looked at them and chosen, out of sensitivity, out of recognition of their place, to not enforce our obstruction of right-of-way bylaw to date. Is that right?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. The Use and Care of Roads bylaw does not permit memorials such as these currently, and that's essentially the default position for municipalities across the country. Virtually every municipality would have a bylaw similar to Use of Care of Roads to protect their rights in order to enable our rights of way to do the many things that we ask them to do. And that is essentially the default position, and as I think everybody recognizes, it's a very emotionally charged item, and that has been the position that staff have taken in the lack of a specific direction.
And so we could have had all manner of roadside memorial removed if the city had wanted to, but has chosen not to.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I then have a different set of questions. Some of you may have caught some news coverage over, well over a year since I first mentioned it, and most recently, a family member, Brent Nassau, the brother of Danielle Nassau, who was killed on Queen Street by a car door opening back several years ago now. He has been working on a project to create a national cycling monument that could also serve the purpose of a permanent memorial location. I have been working with city staff to try and identify an appropriate location for that. I just wanted to clarify that staff continue to be open to that, to working with me and Mr. Nassau to trying to make this happen. I know we haven't specifically got formal approval, but if I could get clarification from staff that the city would be prepared to keep working on establishing such a monument.
Mr. Chair, absolutely, yes, we would.
All right. Would that need to, again, just in terms of process, would that need to come through a committee? Would I have, if say it was in my ward, have delegated authority, assuming it was deemed to be surplus property, meet other technical requirements? I just wonder for process whether I could do that with delegated authority with staff, or whether it would need to come through this or another committee.
Through the chair, Councillor, you would have to go through the normal process of, if you were looking at declaring a land surplus, that would be through the real estate group and going through the process there. And then if there was any requirements that required waiver of any bylaws, then you would have to seek council's approval, et cetera. So it's a process that's all set up that you would go through the normal process. And at that time, we would determine and consider if there's any need for committee and council's involvement.
Okay, so I will leave it there. I just did want it known that I am working on that. It's been a slow process because it has been something that's come from a community member up, not me driving it and wanting to hurry it along. But I'm glad to know that we'll continue that cooperation with staff to try and make it happen. I know you can't make a commitment to an unseen proposal at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chernyshenko. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments and questions. The Chair is correct that this is not a simple issue. It's probably one of the most difficult things that certainly I've been confronted with since in the past year since this term of council. Pedestrians and cyclists are by far our most vulnerable users. We want to make our roads safe for everyone, motorists, cyclists, pedestrians, and the city has done a lot. We've done a lot as a city to work towards that, building segregated bike lanes, widening our sidewalks when we have the when we have the opportunity to do so. But these memorials are powerful symbols of horrible personal tragedies, and they have become part of the grieving process for families and for the entire community. On the issue of the time, I won't be supporting either the report or the motion. I believe that, for myself, a year is a much more appropriate amount of time to have a memorial in place. But just on the issue of, public space, if we take just the ghost bikes, do we know how many are present around the city? I think it's 5, maybe?
Mr. Chair, we don't have a specific inventory at this point of roadside memorials, ghost bikes or otherwise. Okay. Certainly I would say that ghost bikes would represent a small portion of the total memorials across the city.
Okay. So while we're on the issue of the ghost bikes, though, because that seems to be the hot button here, let's say 5 square meters in the whole city, and we've got 5,400 kilometers of roadway. So I don't buy the public space issue. And on the terms and on the issue of distraction, I mean, you could, it's subjective. All of this is very subjective, what is and isn't a distraction. But also on the issue of mobility and accessibility, you don't have to go much further than Elgin Street to know that if you're a parent with a stroller or somebody in a wheelchair, that those sandwich boards that are always up on Elgin never get taken down. That we've got main streets across the city that impair mobility. So just on that, I just want to be on record as saying that, I just don't buy the mobility issue, and I don't buy the distraction issue. I think that we do need some sort of bylaw. We need something to guide us when it's any type of memorial, as Councillor Moffat pointed out. But I think that we need to be honest about why that is the case. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Manette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the report, it says that in terms of general guidelines indicates that no excavation or penetration of the right-of-way. Now, does that include like the cross types? You see along, as an example, in 174, would that include that type of designation?
Mr. Chair, the rationale for that clause was to protect utilities and various other things that are within the roadway or the right-of-way. We recognize that these memorials are not going through any sort of technical review. People are not getting utility locates. Certainly the intention is to prevent people from undertaking excavation. So if excavation was required for a cross or a similar thing, that is something that we would be looking to minimize as much as possible. There may be other mechanisms to mount the cross or something like a cross to a flat plate or something that would stay on top of the ground.
So just for clarification, like I said, on the 174, I've seen them on the 174. We see them almost on major highways, on the side of the roads or whatever. Does the policy now say they will not be able to put those up, or does it say that they would have to contact the city and make sure that, they're not going through any hydro or anything like that?
Mr. Chair, we understand as staff that the nature of these memorials are very spontaneous in the way that they come together, and that, regardless of whether we created a system for people to contact the city, people aren't going to contact the city with respect to putting these in place. I think the policy doesn't suggest that we can't have a memorial like that, but it does suggest that we need to be cautious about how they're installed, and there are other ways that perhaps people can look at installing them rather than something that would require excavation.
Okay, so another question is, if they are able to install it, it would be under the 6-month criteria, as it would be for bicycles, I would imagine?
The policy is intended to apply to all roadside memorials, regardless of whether they're resulting from a pedestrian, a cycling, or traffic, or other tragic event. We have a number of memorials within the rights-of-way that deal with other events that have taken place tragically within our rights-of-way or adjacent to our rights-of-way, and it would apply to all of them equally.
Do flowers, is that an issue? If I'm going back to Ardette Wood, what happened in Orleans, and every year the family and residents put up flowers on the crossover, where it happened. Do you see that as an issue with the new bylaw?
Certainly, when flowers would constitute part of a roadside memorial, so they would, if we received information that they existed or a complaint, we would follow the same process if it was live material, whether it was flowers or shrubs, as we would if it was another sort of structure. The only difference when we're dealing with flowers within the policy compared to something else is the length of time that we would hold that, if and when it comes time for the city to remove it. The policy does call for us to hold, something, whether it's make a shrine of some sort or a cross, to hold that for a period of 1 month to allow the proponents an opportunity to come and reclaim it. But the policy does call for us to dispose of live material, whether it's flowers or shrubs, immediately, so that it's we're not dealing with rotting vegetation.
So with flowers on a fence, or in Ardette Wood's case, overpass, which is not affecting the sight line, if we receive complaints, we would take them down? Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Chair, I think we would treat it the same if we received complaints. I think it's also worth noting we don't have memorial patrols. We're not suggesting, a staff, go on a rampage to identify these things. But as they are identified to the city, whether it's live material or whether it is, construction of some sort, it would all be treated the same.
Does NCC Parkways fall under our present proposal? Or is that different?
The policy would apply to city-owned rights-of-way.
City-owned only, so it would not affect NCC. And it would be on complaint basis, I imagine, by law, or would it be Public Works that would be responsible?
Ultimately, it would be Public Works that would remove the structure and hold on to the structure. And from a notification perspective, 311 would be the starting point for people to identify those. Okay.
But I guess it will be on complaint basis, or will we be actively monitoring and enforcing it?
We're not proposing any sort of active patrols from a city perspective, but I also wouldn't necessarily only characterize it as a complaint. When the city becomes aware of it, that's when we would enter it into a database, and when the clock would start. From a city's perspective, some of these may create operational issues or be an obstruction, and if that's the case, it may in fact in that case be a city person that identifies it or flags it as as existing in the right of way. But certainly it's not the intent that staff would go forward with a mandate to to seek these out.
Thank you for the comments. I will be supporting Councillor Chernushenko's and the Chair's motion. However, I would have liked to have seen a bit more leniency towards flowers. I think if it's not affecting sightline, I don't think it's a major issue for anybody as far as I'm concerned. One of the issues that was that this motion came forward, I believe, was for sightline and for safety of pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. And someone putting flowers on the fence, I don't see that as being an issue. So I don't know if there's an amendment that can be put or just a direction that be put forward. But flowers, I don't think is something that should be. And I understand if someone does a cross with a flower, then that's an issue. But just flowers on the fence where it doesn't obstruct any view, I don't think should be something that we should worry about.
Thank you for that. I guess from a practical perspective, though, if the flowers were put up and they can be there for 6 months, chances are they'll, just by default, nature will run its course. So I don't think flowers are going to turn out to be a significant issue in that. You can certainly put them up there, and they can be up there for the 6 months, and that would, in all likelihood, in our climate, take them through winter. So they would take care of themselves. What I can give you a bit more further clarification. One thing that Derek didn't say is any existing memorials that are out there that have come to the city's attention, they will be in place for another 6 months from the time that if this passes and passes at council as well, the time starts ticking 6 months after the council vote.
Could I put an amendment, Mr. Chair, saying that if it's flowers that are on fences that are not obstructing the sight line, that it be considered?
I turn that over to Councillor Chernushenko if he accepts that as a friendly amendment.
Yes.
I suppose the problem for me is it's naturally, a couple of flowers staying for a period of time is one thing. One can go to the, I suppose, absurd extreme of, very, very large numbers attached to a fence over a long period of time. So it's hard to come up with a set rule for it. So I find it a little difficult to respond to that and say, X number of flowers, this big, goodness, who wants to be in that position?
An example right in your ward, I remember when I was on the exhibition board way back, and there was one of the rides where someone died right near Bank Street. And for longest of time, they put flowers along the fence. That was not obstructing any view. It was out of respect for that individual who passed away, unfortunately, at that location. That's the type of scenario that I'm more or less indicating. I don't want to vote against the 6 months. I think the 6 months is a good proactive approach. But I think there should be some leniency towards having flowers along the fence. And if someone it's fine, they'll be gone in 6 months, but a family might decide, yes, I want to put some flowers after 6 months again. So, and that's,
maybe I can help with that, Councillor. And I don't know, Derek, I look to you for this, but if there was a break, so to speak, would that not create a new scenario, or is that a continuing one? I don't know.
Mr. Chair, the policy does have language that does speak to replacing a memorial after it's come down, so that we don't end up with a situation where we have, a memorial goes up for 6 months, it comes down for a couple of days and goes back up. So, while I appreciate, I wish I could be more helpful in resolving this issue, the policy does speak, as it's proposed, does speak to not permitting replacement memorials in its place.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Fleury is next.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Just a couple of questions What my understanding, so when I read the report, and obviously there's been ample discussions with the community and good coverage in the media on the issue, there's two elements. One is the grievance, the family grievance and the incident portion, and the other one is actually kind of a scenario by which, you know, there's an incident, we flag the location, and then there's a series of, there's the visual, in the case of a bike, for example, of a tragic incident with a bike, there'd be the bike display, but also there's an internal mechanism by which we review those incidents. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we do review all pedestrian and cycling collisions through the city. We started that in 2013, and so we take a look at that to establish if there's any patterns and things like that so that we can go and proactively do some either education, if it's engineering. It ties into our Safe Roads Ottawa program.
And what is done I mean, respectfully of the tragic incident, what is done to communicate that with committee members or with council or with the family of the person?
Specific to specific locations, we don't do that communications, but we do communicate when we give our updates through the Safe Roads Auto programs or the initiatives that we're doing. So, for example, we had a rash of fatalities with regards to cyclists and trucks. So we did our campaign this last spring with the Heaviest Truck Association to provide awareness to both cyclists and truck drivers that they need to make sure that you're not in people's blind spots. So we do those kind of things. With regards to engineering, we do work if there's modifications that need to be made at intersections. We do work with the ward councillor on those, so they're made aware of those things.
J'aimerais juste passer à travers une série de scénarios pour comprendre le pratico-pratique, ce qui va arriver avec la résolution. Je parlais tantôt de la mémoire pour la famille, pour la communauté, ce qui est un des éléments. L'autre élément qui est vraiment l'aspect plus procédural, de revoir l'ensemble de l'incident puis voir ce qui se produit. Je me questionne qu'on utilise le vélo ou je sais que dans le passé, il y avait des enseignes qui avaient été faites pour les piétons. Là, ce que je comprends, c'est que pour les premiers, la motion qui nous est présentée, c'est qu'on permettrait ces deux enseignes-là, genre du type d'être présents. On conceptualise ce qui est permis, mais après la période, au début c'était 3 mois, il y en a qui suggèrent 1 an, aujourd'hui on a une motion pour 6 mois. C'est que là, ensuite de ça, la famille pourrait aborder la ville pour avoir une affiche quelconque qui définit en mémoire de cette personne-là. Mais je me questionne pourquoi, je vois l'importance du vélo. Je pense que le vélo a eu un indicatif, le vélo blanc, c'est un élément important dans le processus. Mais je me demande pourquoi c'est pas officialisé dans ce contexte-là, l'affiche. C'est seulement suite à une demande, il semble y avoir un discordum où il y a comme vraiment une séquence, il y a un incident tragique qui survient. Il y a un élément de mémoire qui est soulevé, puis suite à ça, sous la demande de la famille ou de la communauté, il y aurait un affichage. Peut-être tu pourrais m'expliquer c'est quoi la différence dans ta perspective entre le vélo, la forme d'un piéton ou l'affichage comme tel?
La différence est le vélo est un monument spontané qui est spontané et il n'y a pas une revue technique, il n'y a pas un process pour la ville pour donner notre approval pour ce mémorial. C'est tout sans règle, sans process. Mais quand vous avez l'affiche, c'est un process qui avait une revue par la ville, qui est créé par la ville et installé par la ville aussi. Et c'est créé dans un process qui est continu avec la sécurité publique.
Je vois la validité d'avoir un standard. Je pense que c'est important de le faire. On a vu certains incidents où un de mes collègues me partageait, il y avait une citrouille qui avait été mise près d'un mémorial, puis ça avait créé des enjeux. On parlait des fleurs tantôt, puis les fleurs, c'est peut-être quelque chose de séparé, mais tout autre objet qui pourrait être en souvenir de cette personne-là a évidemment une importance significative pour la famille, mais peut devenir problématique dans la sphère du piéton, cycliste et de l'usage de la route. Alors, je peux comprendre pourquoi on met de l'avant ce standard-là. Je peux également comprendre pourquoi il y a une période de mémoire, puis suite à ça, il y a différents éléments. Je pense que l'aspect qui est peut-être sous-entendu, qui est peut-être pas mis de l'avant, c'est qu'il y a une pression communautaire que s'il y a un incident, on doit recorriger l'intersection ou peu importe. Puis dans le contexte présentement, c'est que le feedback ou la revue de la ville qui est complétée n'est jamais partagée avec globalement la communauté. Pourquoi on ne verrait pas des améliorations ou des restrictions ou des reconfigurations d'intersection. Puis je pense que dans la discussion qu'on a ce matin, l'élément qui est sous-entendu, c'est toute cette voie-là, c'est toute c'est une pression sociale de dire, en tant que ville, en tant qu'élu, en tant que communauté, il y a eu un incident tragique, on doit revoir. Puis la révision n'est pas fournie de façon publique. Donc, s'il y a eu une erreur de l'automobiliste, du cycliste, du piéton ou autre, on le partage jamais. Puis je comprends pourquoi on le fait. On le fait pas pour des raisons de familiales, de respect et tout. Mais d'un autre côté, à la ville et au niveau des élus, on continue à vivre une pression qui dit, ben pourquoi vous avez rien fait? Il y a eu un incident qui est tragique. Puis je pense que le rapport adresse l'élément visuel, mais adresse pas la pression sociale sur l'incident. Puis ça demeure un élément qui est sous-entendu de la discussion ce matin. It wasn't a question, it was a comment.
Yeah, no, I'm just waiting to see if staff is going to respond.
They don't need to respond. It's like what I
like how you said it. I was wondering if they wanted to comment on it. Councillor Kakish.
Thank you. I just want to first of all echo Councillor Chernyshenko's point. I think the ultimate goal that I'd like to see as well is having a permanent memorial monument with this. And I know Councillor Chernyshenko has been working with the families that have been impacted, and certainly I'll echo his comments in terms of in the long-term plans to work towards having a permanent monument for the victims and their families. In terms of the consultation process, I know the Chair, Vice Chair, and Councillor Chernyshenko have been working closely with the families, but I also heard Ms. Belanger in her presentation saying that we haven't done enough or reached out. Can you just walk me through how we consulted with stakeholders and the people on both sides?
Mr. Chair, the direction we were given back in June was to conduct a review of best practices of other municipalities. So as you know, I think as we point out in the report, we've conducted that review. We've also done some consultation internally with our internal stakeholders, the different departments within the city, and received feedback from them from an operational perspective. But as far as going out to a broader public consultation, that's something that has not been done. That was not part of the direction that was given, and that would be another piece that would have that wasn't part of this report, right? The report that's before you, the recommendation that's before you, was based on a best practices review and consultation with our internal stakeholders.
And so a lot of families that have been impacted, I guess, were not part of this process?
That's correct. There was no public consultation.
Okay.
To be fair, Councillor, staff did what Councillor Chernyshenko's report directed them to do. So they followed through on what we asked them to do.
Yeah, no, I got that part of it. On the enforcement part, and to echo some of Councillor Manette's points on point 6 in the draft policy, 6.11, all temporary memorials shall be removed no later than 6 months from the date that the city becomes aware of the memorial, and the public royal allowance will be reinstated. I find that a little weak, and I know we're trying to be lenient and accommodating, obviously, as a family families go through a tough time. But at the same time, from an enforcement perspective, I find that legislation's a bit weak. Have we considered a way of perhaps formalizing that process, whether it's a simple registry, for example, where it's formalized, and that way the city can track that, as well as the families know this is when it's gone up, and the city knows when it's gone up. So it seems a little bit weak in terms of enforcement.
Councillor, and I'll let staff answer, but I mean it's very much the same system that we use for bylaw, which is complaint driven, and that's the same sort of model that we're using here. If a concern is raised within the community, then the city will respond to that, or alternatively, if it provides an operational challenge in terms of either mowing or plowing or that sort of thing, then the city will bring it to its own attention, I guess is the way to put it. But it's very much the model that we use for our bylaw system, and that seems to work pretty well.
I get that, but I guess if you're a bylaw and you're out in enforcing, how do you know it's 6 months if you don't have a date to work with?
Mr. Chair, if I may answer the initial question, certainly we did consider a variety of options to bring forward as potential recommendations for your consideration. Certainly one of the things we looked at is, do we want to create a process where we require a permit, right? And the benefits of that would certainly be, we know who it is, we know who we can hold accountable, we have a dedicated timeline. The downside of that, however, is, it creates an additional bureaucracy for people that may not be interested in going through that bureaucracy when they're going through a period of grief associated with a very tragic event. And rather than create a situation of non-compliance, we tried to bring forward a policy that would be easy for people to follow, that would be easy for the city to follow and administer. The downside, of course, to that is we don't necessarily know who the proponent is, or we don't have a specific date to know for sure when it has gone up. However, we do have, and we continue to work with our partners in Public Works to refine and develop a procedure internally to, create a database where we will track these, and when we do become aware of them, from that point forward, it will be 6 months. Your comment is fair that it's not a rigid process, but that is, I guess that was intentional, and that's, staff are making that recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And to be clear, I'm not asking for more red tape or more bureaucracy. It's just as you point out, it makes it more clear for everyone, all the parties for the city, as well as the applicant, and formalizes that process in terms of legislatively, as well as for enforcement, from an enforcement perspective as well, should complaints be coming in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions before I turn the mic back over to Councillor Chernushenko to wrap up. Additionally, what the city has done in the last little while is also unroll a program whereby you can purchase a memorial sign, and I guess there's some confusion out there around how that's going to work. So I've got a couple of questions in that regard. First of all, there's a fee, I understand, of about $250. There's been some suggestion that somehow the city is making money off of this program. I'm wondering if you can comment on what the $250 does or doesn't do in terms of putting up the sign and maintaining it.
Mr. Chair, the $250 it's a cost recovery, so it's basically the fabrication of the sign and then having our staff go out and install the pole and install the sign.
The other issue I'd like some clarification about is there's also some suggestion in terms of some of the feedback that I know I've received and probably my colleagues have received about a provision in the policy about whether someone has a criminal record or not, whether that would not allow such a sign to be to go up. I would hope that we're exercising some discretion, or will exercise some discretion in that regard. For example, if you have a shoplifting conviction when you're 20 years old and you pass away in an automobile accident when you're 55, that's not going to forego you having a sign put up in your memory by your family or your friends. And I'm wondering if Mr. Wiley or Derek, you can speak to that. Again, I would hope the staff is going to exercise some judgment and discretion in terms of how that works.
Chair, yes, the city has full discretion, and that's not the intent whatsoever in the policy. The wording is may, so we'll exercise discretion on that front.
Appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Again, I'm going to turn, if there are no more questions, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Councillor Chernushenko to do a wrap-up on his motion.
Thank you very much. It could be said no one in their right mind would have brought this forward and put themselves in this sort of a position of trying to govern grieving or govern memorials. This isn't something that I would have wanted to do or set out as part of a campaign platform. This is something that became unfortunately very obvious as a result of hearing my community from all sides over a number of years. It became clear to me that a lack of a process in terms of members of the public using public space for what is initially a spontaneous memorial going on over many months and then into several years was something that was an issue for enough people that rules were in fact needed. I'm not someone who wants rules where they're not needed, but it became clear that on a public rights of way, the use of that space for memorials was something that was of concern to enough people that the lack of rules wasn't good enough. We have the ability, we've always had the ability to say, no, take that down, or it can stay, but it's got to be made safer, made secure, etc. It can't be this big. But what we have not had is a time limit to that. Did we need a time limit to that? You could argue no, but enough people have felt that, yes, there are ways to mourn and to grieve and to memorialize in perpetuity. We've had them for millennia. We have graveyards. We have monuments. People in their homes have urns. There are many ways, and it's not for me or for us to tell anyone how to do that. But unfortunately, we're at a point where I believe the city has to say, on a public space, there is a time limit in addition to some physical and practical rules around that. Where this policy came from is quite simply to get back to, and in defense of our staff, not having a large public consultation on this, what they were asked was, what do other cities do? What are best practices? This is not the only city. No, in fact, there are hundreds, there are thousands of cities where such phenomena exists. So what are other people doing? And staff came back to us with this report indicating what those best practices were, and what we have in front of us is a proposal to adopt best practices, a package of best practices, amended to 6 months now, so that we can have clarity for everyone. Just the two delegations who presented, I think, admirably indicated two equally valid, equally important, equally passionate and compassionate sides of this issue. There are much greater extremes, I can assure you. We've received some of those letters. The extremes from no, never on a public space to always, anyhow, and forever. Most people are somewhere in the middle, and this policy, I think, does its best to reflect a fair, consistent approach. There's a lot of talk about ghost bikes, and I suppose that's because ghost bikes are the biggest, they're the most recent, they're the most prominent, and the most political. And I don't say that as a criticism. There's a reason why the ghost bike phenomenon came up, because something that we were seeing reached a point where the public said, this is intolerable, we can't take this anymore. Cyclists being killed, something has to be done about this. But I want to separate, I guess, two things I want to say. One is, it only seemed fair and right to not create a set of rules around ghost bikes, but rather a set of rules around roadside memorials on public space of all kinds. That was one thing. And the other, of course, as has been brought out by a number of my colleagues here, is the presence of a memorial or not does not dictate whether the city investigates and takes action. We can be faulted for a lack of action. We can be faulted for inadequate changes to infrastructure in certain locations. That's quite separate from whether there is a roadside memorial. I did do a lot of research. I have not seen any research that either proves or disproves that a roadside memorial creates action, makes it safer, or makes it less safe. So when I say I think we have to dissociate those, I believe we really do. A roadside memorial is about a memorial, not about making it more safe. But in the short term, the politicization, if you will, of the ghost bike is something that I believe we're still prepared to live with. The question is for how long and how big. So as my time is up, I am very, I was going to say I'm very pleased. I'm very unhappy that we need this policy. I'm unhappy that people are dying on our roads, whatever mode of transportation they're using, but I'm pleased that our staff, my colleagues, and the public on the whole are coming to a consensus on how we might do this in a fair and compassionate way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chernushenko. And just one thing I want to reiterate, I think you made an excellent point that the two delegations that we did have this morning were sort of the yin and the yang of the argument, but presented in a very respectful way on both sides. And so I want to thank again, I see they're both still in the audience, so I want to thank you again for sort of putting the bookends on this particular discussion for us. It's very helpful and informative, and appreciate it. So I'm going to, I guess first we go to the motion, clerk, and then amended report. So on the motion, amendment carried? And on the report itself? Carried. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item number 5 on the agenda, which again we do not have a presentation, but staff are available to answer questions, and we do have one delegation to speak to the matter, and that's the Hunt Club road speed reduction matter, and the delegation I have is Mr. Dave Langner. Sure. Yeah, Mr. Wagner, take your seat, but I'm just going to, Councillor Deans raises a good point. I'm just going to ask, it was her report, so I'm going to ask her to introduce it. Thank you, Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce this topic and tell you why I have this motion before the committee today. This is a motion to reduce a small stretch of Hunt Club Road from their current speed limit of 80 kilometers an hour down to 60 kilometers an hour. If you can imagine Hunt Club Road, this is east of Bank Street, east of Albion. As you travel east along that roadway, it is 60 kilometers an hour until you get to the intersection of Cahill Road East, and then it goes up to, it's an odd place for a change in speed, but then it goes up to 80 along that road. And for the last many years, I have heard from the community associations and from a myriad of constituents who feel that that speed is inappropriate for that stretch of the roadway and that it creates a safety hazard in the neighborhood. And I have to say, I think it's appropriate that we're having this discussion right after the roadside memorial discussion today, because it really does pose safety concerns for the community that live in that neighborhood. There is a community center, the Greenboro Community Center at Laurie Greenberg Drive, and many families have their children crossing Hunt Club Road to access that community center, and I can tell you that they don't feel safe doing that. You know, the engineers will tell you the road is engineered to 80 kilometers an hour. But for me, and representing the community that I represent, I will tell you that I think community safety is beyond an engineering exercise. And I think it does speak to quality of life and what kind of community that we all want to live in. And parents, I don't think, feel safe with their children out trying to cross that road with high volumes of speed going through there. I think it's interesting as well to take a look at the two intersections, Hunt Club and Cahill Drive, and Hunt Club and Laurie Greenberg, because they're only one block apart. And one has an 80-kilometer speed limit, and the other has 60-kilometer speed limit. And I give you that the design of the intersections is different, and there's more than one factor. But if you look just at the speed factor, there's a 40% higher collision rate at the 80-kilometer zone than there is at the 60-kilometer zone. And so I think that does speak to the concern that many in the community have. As you know, we recently, in the last year or two, opened the intersection to the 417 and Hunt Club Road, and that has dramatically increased the volume of traffic on that roadway. In fact, over the last 4 years, the increase has been 8,700 cars per day, so it's now up to about 21,000 cars a day, and that number is continuing to rise. So beyond the safety issue and the speed issue, there is a volume issue, and there is an issue of vibrations for the homes along that stretch of road. So for all of those reasons, and because of the overwhelming number of my constituents who have continued to plead to have this small stretch of roadway have the speed reduction to 60, I'm bringing it forward. And I can tell you last fall, during the municipal election campaign, the mayor and I heard a great deal about this, and the mayor has given his full support as well to the reduction to 60. So I know we're going to hear from one of my constituents who isn't in agreement with that, but I do think that the overwhelming number of residents that I represent in that neighborhood do believe that it's in the interest of safety in our community to reduce that speed. So I hope you will consider that today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deans. And I made an error in jumping to this item, so we'll have to go back to number 4 to get Councillor Froy's comment, but we'll do that after we've finished with this one. So, Mr. Wagner, you have 5 minutes, and welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I know we've talked about this before. I just wanted to assure the committee that I'm not a speed demon. I'm not the guy in your rearview mirror tailgating you if I feel you're going too slowly. I consider myself an average driver. I've lived in the neighborhood for 16 years. I've raised 3 children there. They, in fact, were the ones that encouraged me to come out and speak, because when they heard about the proposed change in speed limit, they've said they've never had a problem with that. My wife runs a home daycare. She crosses that street daily to go to the Greenboro Community Center. What I'm concerned about is that if a speed limit doesn't reflect the reality of the road conditions, it'll simply be ignored. People that do try to do the speed limit will cause a rolling traffic jam, and it works both ways. If you consider Samuel Boulevard in front of the Science and Tech Museum or by the McDonald's, the speed limit is actually 70 kilometers an hour. No one can come close to that because of the volume of traffic, and it's not safe to do so. 60 seems appropriate around Bank Street, around the Airport Parkway, around McCarthy, but the stretch that we're talking about is 4-lane, divided, wide shoulders with bike lanes, offset sidewalks, and well lit. And I'm just concerned that for those that do try to do the speed limit, like I do, they will cause more trouble than is worth. That's it. That's my presentation.
Okay, well, thank you for coming down. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you. I don't see staff at the table, but I assume they're in the room that worked with Councillor Deans. So just one quick, not a question so much, but a comment and a direction. Under the Public Works comment, Mr. Landry, there's an indication that there's a concern that operating speeds may not go down without enforcement. Not trying to tread on other people's territory, but could I direct you and your staff to confirm to OPS Traffic when the new, assuming this passes, and I will be supporting it, that you can inform OPS Traffic Division of the change as soon as it goes into place, so that it's on, so to speak, on their radar, and they're aware of the change, and that there could be some, I guess, initial confusion around it, and they should be aware of it. Is that acceptable?
Yep, we will talk to the police.
Okay, appreciate that. Are there any comments or questions for staff? So we'll call the vote. Oh, sorry, yes, there's a technical amendment that you'll be bringing, Councillor. Yes, you should. Well, we'll get it for you.
Whereas the French recommendation contained in the above-noted report is incorrect and does not match the English recommendation, and whereas the English version of the recommendation contained in said report is correct, therefore be it resolved that the French recommendation be corrected to accurately reflect the wording contained in the English recommendations as follows. Do you want me to read this French?
I think we might enjoy that.
Le comité des transports recommande au Conseil de réduire la limite de vitesse à 60 km/h sur le chemin Un Club entre un point situé à 1000, you're testing my 140, how do you say that? 1040 mètres à l'est de la promenade Cahill et le chemin Conway.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fleury asked me to do that. So on the technical amendment?
Carried.
Carried. And on the report itself?
Carried.
Carried. So we'll return to Councillor Fleury on item number 4, and I apologize for that, Councillor Fleury.
Mr. Chair, you are fully forgiven. It's an honest mistake. I just want to take a second to speak of this important investment. If you know the American Embassy close to Chateau Laurier, the cathedral, we've just completed the construction along Sussex Drive, and on Sussex there's nice wide sidewalks, nice new bike lanes, and on one side of the embassy there was the improvement to the previous walls, if you will, that added much needed space and welcome to our community, and now we're going to reflect that on the Mackenzie Avenue. And I want to highlight the work of Zlatko and his team, as well as the American Embassy, who are willing partners to see those improvements, and through that with the NCC, who have been delightful to work on this project for that improvement. So just wanted to mention the efforts of the stakeholders and how everyone wants that space to be up and ready ahead of 2017. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If there are no other questions, carried? Okay, thank you. Returning to the agenda, there are no in-camera items. Are there any notice of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting? Okay, seeing none. I believe there's an inquiry from Councillor McKinney.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to put forward this inquiry, and just so that we're clear where I'm going with it, it's as some of my colleagues and Councillor Fleury mentioned, that the importance around pedestrian cycling safety really is about what we can do to prevent it. In the end, it's about not having roadside memorials and not having ghost bikes. So the inquiry that I'm putting forward, the questions that I'm asking do flow from the Office of the Chief Coroner for Ontario that looked at pedestrian cycling deaths in 2012, and one of the recommendations around pedestrian death review stated that municipalities in the province should undertake annual forensic reviews of all pedestrian deaths that occurred within their jurisdictions, and seek to understand the root causes of the death, with a view to implementing any engineering changes that could enhance safety for pedestrians and therefore avoid future deaths. So my inquiry is what I hope a first step to developing a policy and a way of doing annual forensic reviews around each death that occurs on our roadways for pedestrians and cyclists, so that we can limit them as best we can. So the inquiry, I'll skip the first part because I did just sort of paraphrase it, but I'm asking today what steps have already been taken to institute annual detailed reviews of all pedestrian and cyclist collisions in Ottawa. What steps must be taken to implement engineering or other changes identified in those reviews that may enhance safety for pedestrians and cyclists and avoid future collisions or fatalities. And also asking that legal staff at the same time provide advice on the format that this can be released in with respect to any confidentiality issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Additionally, Councillor Fleury has an inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It reads as follows. The city's winter maintenance quality standards articulates that the priority of snow clearing on each individual street's sidewalk is based on the roadway classification on the traveled surface. This creates a situation where some sidewalks, especially in the core, are under-maintained for the level of pedestrians' usage of those streets. Is there already a plan to address the maintenance gap, especially given our newly adopted complete street policy? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? Adjournment? And just a reminder, our next meeting is December the 2nd, and we will be dealing with budget, so plan for the day, just in case. Okay, thank you very much.
Screen, and it's also shown to the people in the gallery. Great question. Yes, ma'am. So that's a good question. So what if you're already a councillor and it's election time again? Well, elections actually take place every 4 years. So I'm a councillor for a 4-year period. Our last election took place, and my good friend Jean Cloutier, which is he's a newbie. He got elected in class of 2014. The campaign actually starts very early. It's not like a federal election where it's 30 days or 60 days. We actually start in January. And it's hard because if you're an incumbent, if you're running again, you got to keep doing all the things you have to do for your ward. At the same time, getting out there door to door to door. And when I say doors, I went to, well, I was pretty close to 14,000 doors in my ward over several months to make sure I spoke to people and got their feedback, which helped produce my platform. Really good questions. You guys are talking now. Any further questions? Well, I'll be hanging out. My good friend Jean Cloutier, the councillor for Alta Vista, will be hanging out as well. And we hope you enjoyed City Hall today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, bonjour à tous et à tous. Sorry if my back is to some of you. My name is Jocelyn Turner. I work in corporate communications, and I'm here to facilitate the presentations this morning. Today you're all here following someone very important at City Hall who makes significant contributions to the residents of Ottawa and the people who live here. The City of Ottawa has more than 17,000 employees, and there are over 19 departments in the city. And sometimes it might seem like a bit of a Parks and Rec episode, but you also may not realize all of the different services that the city provides to you every day. When you got up this morning, did you run the tap? Did you flush the toilet? Those sewers and water mains are run by city employees. Did you maybe feed your dog or your cat? Those pet licenses are also run by the city. Did you take a city bus or drive on a city street or walk on the sidewalk today? These are all structures that are built by and maintained by city employees, including snow removal and salting when the winter comes. I work in corporate communications. And our job is to keep the public informed every day. So, when you want to learn more about what the city does, please check out our website at ottawa.ca for more information. Vous pouvez en apprendre plus en parlant avec la personne que vous a invité ici aujourd'hui ou en consultant le site web ottawa.ca. So also please ask lots of questions of the people who brought you here today, as well as the councillors who are here to answer any questions that you may have. So, to tell you a bit more about the areas of the city, we have some lovely colleagues who are here to speak to you today. Kathy McGee from Parks, Recreation and Cultural Services is here to tell you all about the volunteer opportunities that the city offers and how you can get your 40 hours of volunteer experience. Christine Chevalier from the Ottawa Public Library will talk to you about the great resources and programs available to teens at your local library branch. Phil Renaud and Pat Uciconi from our social media team in corporate communications will here to talk to you briefly about our social media presence. And Kendra Hobbs, who is also from Parks and Rec and Cultural Services, will let you know about all sorts of great things happening this fall and winter in Ottawa, so you can take advantage of all the services that we offer. So, to keep it short and sweet, let's get Kathy McGee to the stage. Can I get a round of applause for Kathy? Yay.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Can I ask everybody, I hate to talk to someone back here. Can everybody move up here? It's going to be easier for the presenters to, I know that you want to sit in the chairs. I'm sorry, Councillor. Can everybody move up to the seats up here? Everybody. We're good over here? You're okay. You still want to sit in that seat, I know. I hate to talk behind a mic, and I know there's a lot of you, and I do project a very loud voice, but I will stand here, but I will move around a bit. So if you can't hear me, put your hand up. So, mon nom est Kathy McGee. Je travaille pour la Direction des Parcs Loisirs et la Culture. I work for Parks, Recreation and Culture, and I'm sure most of you, the youth, are thinking, what is that? So has anybody here ever gone swimming in a public pool? So that's part of our Parks, Rec and Culture, the pools. How about skating on an outdoor rink? That's Parks, Rec and Culture. How about going to Centrepoint Theatre or Shankman? There you go, that's Parks and Culture. We have so many services. We have over 55 community centers, 30 pools, 2 theaters, we have museums, and the list goes on. And what I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to go into too much detail. There are 2 sheets, one French, one English, sont là-bas sur la table. And for the youth, and listen to this, the youth will pick them up, not the parents, right, parents? Right. So the youth are going to pick them up. These are all the opportunities that we have at the city. So it's in French and in English, and all the contact information for the departments that engage volunteers. So we have Parks, Rec and Culture, we have special needs, we have the tree planting, public works, public health, so and the list goes on. So I only have 10 minutes, and I could be here for an hour going through this, so I will leave those with you. As well, we also have the Youth City Connect, Connexion Genéville, and it's a youth mentorship program for youth ages 15 to 30, and it gives you the opportunity to sit with a staff member that we will match you with because of your interest. And for 3 hours, you set up the time with your mentor, and just to pick our brains about what does the city do, what type of staff positions do we have. And so all the information are on these sheets, again, bilingue, et sont sur la table là-bas aussi. So first of all, I wanted to tell you that you have to be 14 years of age to volunteer, and that's our minimum age. And I want to ask, how many people here have started doing their 40 hours? Ooh, I'm very impressed. Yay, woohoo. How many parents here have started nagging the youth about doing their 40 hours? Come on, be honest. I knew it. So the majority of the parents that are here, I know that you're going to let the youth go forward and secure their volunteer placement, because the whole point of the 40 hours is for them to get some experience and get out and make some connections and make that phone call. And for the youth, I know how hard it is to make that phone call and say, hi,